Hello, everyone. We're going to give it a minute, let people trickle in. Hey, everyone. We'll see some more people trickling in, so we'll give it a minute. Right. I think we can get started now. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from the OHCS Multifamily Energy Program that we call in short form as OR-MEP. My name is Mecca Abraham, the program manager of the OR-MEP program, and I work at a company called TRC, and we implement the OR-MEP program on behalf of OHCS. Today, we're covering an exciting update for the program where OR-MEP is expanding statewide thanks to new federal funding for new construction projects. And I also just want to acknowledge the date. Yes, it's April 1st, April Fool's Day, but don't worry, everything we're sharing today is 100% real, no pranks here. So we're happy to have you with us and to discuss these updates. So let's get started. So let me get started to cover some logistical items on how to participate in Zoom. As we're going through our content on the program updates, feel free to enter any questions you may have via the Q&A window. Questions will be answered at the end today. And if you would like captions, you can click the Show Captions to enable captions and then select that arrow icon to select the language. This session is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be shared out via email and will also be posted to the OR-MEP website. All right, so here is our agenda that we have for today. We'll start off with an OR-MEP program overview, and within that, we'll talk about what's different with these new federal funds. Next, we'll move on to the participation process with these new federal funds. We'll cover the steps to receiving incentives and also share a few example project scopes and incentives. And then finally, we'll close things out with Q&A. I'm joined by my colleagues today, Julia Sinix, OR-MEP Technical Manager. She'll cover the second half of this agenda on the participation process. Also have Sarah Cheney, OR-MEP Marketing Manager, and Jeevan Gabaria, OR-MEP Marketing Coordinator, who are monitoring the Q&A box for questions or any technical issues. And finally, also joined with by Tim Clark, OR-MEP Program Manager from the OHCS side and State Energy Program Coordinator. So before we jump into the program updates, we wanted to start with a few poll questions to get to know all of you in the audience and help us fine tune our content that we cover just to understand your knowledge and background on the program and understand more about your background as well. So Sarah and Jeevan, if you could launch the poll. Okay, so our first question is, who are you? You could select your background. And if you don't fit in one of these choices, feel free to put in the other category. Nice. Are we all set with that question? All right. Okay. So you should see the results on your screen. Uh, we have about 33% of you are with affordable housing property owner or developer, 19% are on development team support, 5% architect or engineer, 14% energy consultant, 5% complementary energy program staff, 14% with the city or state government, and then 10% other. Yeah, well, great to have you all here. This is a great mix of group here. Then we'll do the next question. Um, so what parts of the state do you work in? And you can select all that apply. Hey, um, all right, we have a good mix across the state. Uh, Across the state, a lot more in Portland Metro, Willamette Valley, Oregon Coast. Yeah, this is great to see the mix because especially with our funds, we can expand statewide. So great to see some folks from parts of the state that we previously weren't able to serve. All right, and then finally, the last question we have is how familiar are you with the Oregon Multifamily Energy Program? All right, see what our results are with that. Okay, some people that are 30% very familiar, 40% somewhat, 25% slightly familiar, and then 5% not familiar. So great to have some new folks and some familiar faces as well. So thank you. Well, thank you for participating in that poll. That is very helpful to know all of you as we cover today's program updates. Okay, so I'll begin by sharing an overview on the OR-MEP program. OR-MEP is brought to you by Oregon Housing and Community Services, and being a program within OHCS, it's specifically focused on serving affordable multifamily rental properties. OR-MEP was launched in 2018 and provides incentives and design support for energy efficiency upgrades in existing and new construction affordable multifamily rental properties. So as far as energy upgrades, that covers HVAC upgrades, so heating, cooling, and ventilation, water system upgrades such as heat pump water heaters, and then on the envelope side, windows, insulation, air sealing, and then finally lights and appliances, including kitchen appliances and laundry appliances. So the goal of OR-MEP is to reduce the energy burden for residents across affordable multifamily rental housing. So we do that in two ways. The first is through energy efficient building design, and that's where we work with affordable housing property owners and developers on their building design and upgrades to incorporate energy efficiency upgrades to reduce energy consumption. And then the second component is through efficient building use. This where we can inform residents on the energy efficiency upgrades to maximize reducing their energy costs and also increase comfort in their homes. So a bit of program history, as I mentioned, OR-MEP launched in 2018 with state funds. The state funding source is called public purpose charge, which is a legislatively enacted requiring the two investor-owned utilities, Portland General Electric and Pacific Power, to collect 3% of their revenues to support energy conservation in schools, low-income weatherization and housing, and also renewable energy projects. So OR-MEP is part of that low-income weatherization and housing component to support. So because of how the funding is structured, OR-MEP to date has only been able to serve existing or new construction projects located in Portland General Electric or Pacific Power service area. The map to the right shows the service area in yellow. And as you can see, there's a large area of the state that we can't serve with state funds. Despite these funding limitations, OR-MEP has been quite active, and to date, we've had 109 completed projects, more than 7,000 units, and 13 million in incentives paid. We currently have 87 projects enrolled, nearly 5,000 units, with $12 million in incentives reserved. With state funds, now through 2027, we have 13.5 million available in the current state funds. So that now we come to today, where the program is now able to expand statewide with federal funds. So for some background on that, OR-MEP received a grant to expand the program statewide, specifically for the development of new affordable multifamily rental properties. This grant is funded through the U.S. EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, and it's enabled from the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. In 2024, the state of Oregon was awarded $197 million in this climate pollution reduction grant funds, and they support various programs across Oregon state agencies. And one of them includes OR-MEP, with the main goal to help Oregon reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So with these federal funds, we can only serve new construction projects, but the exciting change is the projects can be located anywhere and served by any electric utility. And in the map to the right, that means with the federal funds, we can now serve projects in the green shaded area. These are predominantly consumer-owned utilities, which include municipal utilities, people's utilities districts, and electric cooperatives. So these federal funds are limited and a short-term funding source for the program. There's approximately 9 million in incentives available. And being federal funds, there is a deadline to fully distribute these funds. And as a result, all projects participating in federal funds need to complete by March 1st, 2029. So this is a very strict deadline that we need to adhere to, and we'll cover that in some more detail in the upcoming slides. So next, we'll move on to talking about what's different for OR-MEP with federal funds. For the most part, the process for OR-MEP with federal funds is largely similar to what you're used to with the state funds, but there are some important differences that we want to cover. So first, I'll cover the eligibility requirements. I'm going to go through the state funds and then for the comparison, the federal funds. So we'll start with project type. So for state funds, the project needs to be an existing or new construction multifamily rental property with at least 5 residential units per building. We also accept campuses of 5 or more duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. And then compared to the federal funds, as I mentioned, we can only serve new construction multifamily rental properties. And those also need to be at least 5 residential units per building, or campuses of 5 or more duplexes, triplexes, or quadplexes. And with the electric utility provider, with state funds, the project needs to receive electricity from Pacific Power or Portland General Electric. And with federal funds, a project can be located anywhere in the state and receive electricity from any electric utility in Oregon. And then building heating fuel type. This is the same for state funds and federal funds. Both need to be heated by a hardwired electrical heating system. So that means we can't accept any projects that are gas heated. And then with affordability requirements, this is the same for both state funds and federal funds. Uh, and the requirement is to meet program affordability requirements where residents in at least 50% of units are at or below 80% area median income. And those units must remain affordable for at least 10 years. For those of you who have participated in the past, this involves at the end of completion, signing a grant agreement with OHCS that states those affordability commitments. And then the last item, completion deadline. So this is an area where the state funds and federal funds differ. With the state funds for existing building projects, we have a deadline to complete within 18 months of incentive reservation, and for new construction, within 36 months of incentive reservation. With the state funds, we do have some flexibility with the deadline if a project maybe has some delays, as long as you're keeping our team, the OR-MEP team, updated on your progress and demonstrating progress. We have flexibility with the deadline. But with federal funds, we do, as I mentioned, have a hard deadline. All projects must complete construction and installation of all energy upgrades and submit their completion verification documents to the OR-MEP team no later than March 1st, 2029. So as I mentioned, this deadline is very critical. Given that we can only serve new construction projects, we're now just less than 3 years away from that deadline. So the reality is, for a potential project being new construction, they will likely have to be well along in their design development and probably nearing to start construction soon, or they may have already started construction with energy upgrades already planned. So we do understand that deadline sort of means certain projects will be able to meet that deadline. All right, and then on the enrollment process, there is a difference between the state funds and federal funds. So for those of you who have participated in the state funds previously, you're familiar with the competitive enrollment process every 6 months. So projects that are interested in state funding apply through a process called open enrollment that's open every 6 months. We just wrapped up our last round that closed at the beginning of March. So the state fund enrollment is currently closed, and we'll accept the new application, the next round for applications in July 2026. With the federal funds, this is a first come, first serve process. Federal funding will be available on an ongoing basis starting today, April 1st. And the program will reserve incentives in the order projects complete the enrollment process. So we encourage project teams to apply if your project is new construction and will be completed by March 1st, 2029. So I think we have a sense of some of the activity of projects that could be participating, just knowing other projects that are funded within OHCS that are not currently participating in OR-MEP. Hoping to work with those projects. And if you have energy efficiency upgrades that you're planning or have gaps to fill, we can certainly support you, especially if you're located outside of Pacific Power and PGE service area and hadn't previously been able to participate in the program. So I do also just want to flag the program caps incentives at $200,000 per project, and this is for both state and federal funds. This is what has been in the past and remains unchanged. And this is a diagram just showing how that first step is really the only different step that's different in the process. And then after the steps are the same, similar between state funds and federal funds. So with state funding, you would submit an application during open enrollment funding rounds available every 6 months, and then the highest scoring applications are selected for OR-MEP funding. With federal funding, we do have a pre-approval process, which Julia will review coming up. To get started, you can submit an online interest form to discuss your project and confirm eligibility, review the scope of work and deadlines with the program staff. That pre-approval process is intended just so we can learn more about your project and confirm that you can meet the completion deadline. And then going forward, the steps after that are very similar to what we already have. Julia will go into more detail, but once you receive notice that your project was selected or pre-approved for OR-MEP funding, we have enrollment documents to sign, and then we'll work with you to identify measures in your scope of work, then reserve incentives. And once we reserve incentives, you can move forward with installing your upgrades. There is a verification process involved there. And then once that is complete, the upgrades are complete and verified, that will finalize the completion package, and then we can process that for payment so you can receive the final incentives. All right, so now I'm just going to cover some key details. Some of this is key details specific to the federal funds. I have mentioned some of this already, but this is kind of a summary recap of what's different. So funding availability, funding for this federally funded portion of OR-MEP is limited, and the program doesn't guarantee access to funding for all participants, and we will reserve incentives in the order projects complete the enrollment process. If any time during program operation, the federal funding allocated to the program becomes unavailable, OHCS will suspend incentive reservation and incentive payments and provide notice upon receiving notice of unavailability of funding. Completion deadline. All projects must complete construction and installation of all energy upgrades and submit completion verification documents no later than March 1st, 2029. If an enrolled project fails to meet that completion deadline, this will result in the cancellation of incentive reservation. And then finally, some specific federal requirements. All projects participating in the federal funds must be at least 10% more energy efficient compared to Oregon's base building code. With the projects that we see, tends to be happen if you're doing heating or cooling system upgrades or water system upgrades. So that should get you there. And then the next requirement is that projects over $250,000 in total federal funding from all sources may require compliance with the Buy America, Build America Act. So if you are receiving funding, other federal fundings, and when combined with OR-MEP, that goes over 250, the BABA requirements, we'll want to talk to you about the BABA requirements. If you're only receiving OR-MEP federal funds, since it is capped at $200,000, you wouldn't be required to comply with BABA. And then applicants selected for federal funding will be required to sign a participant support cost agreement. This covers some of the federal requirements, and we do have a sample of that in our documents for federal funds as well that we will want you to review ahead of submitting the application as well. And then finally, applicant organizations must not be excluded, disqualified, or debarred from receiving federal assistance and is not on the federal suspension and debarment list. And I think this question will come up, so just wanted to be preemptive. There are no Davis-Bacon wage reporting requirements with these federal funds. So I think many of you will be happy to hear that. All right, so that concludes my section. I'm going to pass it off to Julia to talk about the participation process.
Thank you, Mecca. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the federal funds participation process. Next slide, please. So Mecca showed you earlier comparing the participation process for the state and the federal funds, and I'm just going to focus on the federal offering. And if you participated in the program in the past, the process is the same, except there's a difference in the entry point. And then there's also an additional requirement that we have to confirm that there's at least 10% energy savings compared to code. And then lastly, there's one additional document that you have to agree to. So at a high level, you'll submit an interest form, and then you'll meet with us to confirm eligibility, and then you'll be notified that the project was pre-approved. And then at that point, you'll identify the measures to put into an energy efficiency scope, and submit all of the required documents for reserving incentives. And then you'll begin or continue to install the measures. And when construction is complete, you'll have a third party verify all of the installation, submit the required documents, and then you'll work with your OHCS production analyst to receive incentives. So let's jump into each of the steps. Next slide, please. So the first step is securing a pre-approval. So unlike the state funding, we can accept applications for the federal funding on a rolling basis, and it's on a first come first served basis. And so you'll do that by first submitting an online interest form, which is available on our website using the link at the bottom of this slide page here, or by navigating to our website, which is OregonMultifamilyEnergy.com, and clicking the Submit an Interest Form button on the top right of the page shown in your screenshot here. And once we receive your interest form, you're going to be assigned an energy advisor from our team, and your energy advisor will be your primary contact throughout your participation in OR-MEP. And you'll need to meet with the energy advisor and discuss the details of your project, including confirming all of the eligibility items that Mecca talked about earlier, and confirm. We'll take a look at your scope and make sure that it's likely to meet that 10% minimum requirement, and also confirm that the project can meet the completion deadline of March 1st, 2029. Like Mecca said, that deadline is a very firm deadline that we really don't have any flexibility with. All right, next slide, please. So if we confirm that that your project meets all of the participation requirements, you'll receive a pre-approval selection notification from us, and you'll submit a signed application form, which is a 1.5 page document, kind of high level information about your project. And that application form will be available as an online form or as a PDF if you prefer that format. And along with that, if the project is not applying for other OHCS funding, you will need to submit a proof of affordability, and then also a W-9 for the entity that's going to be receiving the incentive, if that's already available. Sometimes it's not available at that time, and we can accept that later on when the entity has been established. And then just a quick note that if you have multiple projects, please be sure to submit an interest form for each project and meet with the project staff, program staff, and get the pre-approval for each project. So if we send you the application for one project, but haven't talked to us about another one, please hold on reusing that application form for another project. All right, next slide, please. So the next step is identifying the measures that you're going to be installing and receiving incentives for. And the incentives offered for the state and the federal funds are the same. They're exactly the same. So if you participated in the past, the incentive structure, the measures, the incentive levels, they're all identical. And for those of you who are kind of new to the program, we offer 3 program pathways with escalating incentives to reward a more comprehensive scope of work. So the first two pathways, the menu and the bundled path, are prescriptive. And prescriptive means that we have a list of measures that are available to you to receive incentives if you meet the minimum requirements of those measures. And the difference between the menu and the bundled path is that the bundled path offers you higher incentives for the same measure if you have 3 or more measures in your scope. And then the third pathway, the whole building pathway, that's different in that it's a modeled pathway, meaning you would work with a third-party energy modeler who will help determine the estimated annual energy saving for your design, and you receive incentives based on the estimated kilowatt hour savings compared to code. And on our website, in the resources tab, you're going to find a document called Incentives at a Glance. And that document contains the full overview of the incentive information for all 3 pathways. And one of the requirements, like Mecca mentioned, of the federal fund that's not a requirement in the state funds, is that that your project has to be achieving at least 10% energy savings over code to participate in any of the pathways. And we don't require energy modeling for each project to confirm that 10%, but we can certainly assist you in ensuring and documenting that the project meets that threshold. But generally, if you're installing heat pumps for space heating and cooling, so Douglas heat pumps, package terminal heat pumps, or if you're doing heat pump water heaters for your water heating, then you'll meet that 10% requirement. If you're not doing either of those measures, it could be a little bit tricky getting to that 10%, but we'll help you figure out how to make sure that we get there. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this is a screenshot of the measure table for the menu and the bundled path that you'll find on pages 4 and 5 of the Incentives at a Glance document that I mentioned earlier. Mecca, can you click for me? So be sure to be looking at the new construction measures incentive table. It's the document also has the existing buildings table on earlier pages. Yeah, as a reminder, we offer incentives for energy efficiency features that lead to electric savings compared to code. And we offer incentives for things like HVAC, so heat pumps for space conditioning and then also efficient exhaust fans or ERV, HRVs, also envelope measures like windows, wall and attic insulation, also for heat pump water heaters, as well as appliances like refrigerators, dishwashers, clothes washers, and dryers. And then lastly, we have what's called a tailored measure, which is any one electric saving measure that we don't already offer incentives for, if you have something that's a little bit out of the ordinary. Next slide, please. So once you know your scope, you're going to reserve your incentives. And in order to reserve your incentives, you have to submit an energy efficiency plan. Energy efficiency plan is an Excel-based workbook that's used to document your scope. And it also calculates your incentives for you. You'll also submit supporting documentation like specification sheets or construction drawings or like a work scope document that shows the measures that you are installing that you list in your energy efficiency plan. And also if you're doing the whole building path, which if you recall is the modeled pathway, your energy modeler will submit energy model files that were used to calculate the energy savings in the energy efficiency plan. And then so once we have all of those required documentation, your OR-MEP energy advisor is going to review the submission for accuracy, confirm that we're meeting that 10% minimum threshold, and will issue an incentive reservation letter. The other difference between the state and the federal funds is that there is an additional agreement called the Participant Support Cost Agreement, or PSC agreement, which is part of the requirements associated with these federal funds. And the key T's and C's, the terms and conditions included in that document are the key details that Mecca mentioned earlier. Okay. And then also this offering is we reserve incentives on a first come, first served basis, in the order that projects complete the enrollment process. And you cross that threshold of completing the enrollment process when you return the signed reservation letter and the PSC agreement. And our staff, our program staff is going to be monitoring the pipeline of projects that are working toward reserving incentives, to help make sure that projects aren't sort of investing time and energy into putting the documents together if there's not going to be enough funding available. But we also need your help to maintain a smooth process for everyone by moving quickly once we've issued your pre-approval so that we can get you across that finish line and we can firm up our pipeline. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so after that, once your incentives are reserved, you'll install your upgrades. Your energy advisor is going to communicate with you regularly during construction to make sure project is staying on schedule and able to receive the program incentives as reserved. But we do ask you to update your energy advisor on major project changes that are going to impact OR-MEP incentives. So changes in your energy efficiency measures. We ask that you notify your energy advisor of any changes to your scope that's going to impact your building energy use. These changes could impact your project eligibility if it falls below that 10%. And then also it can impact your final incentive amount. And then also we need to know about changes to your construction schedule. This is especially important if there's a delay that could push beyond that March 1st, 2029 deadline to complete construction and submit all the completion documents. Like we mentioned a few times, we have no flexibility on this deadline. So let us know as soon as possible so we can see if there's anything we can do to troubleshoot and figure out if we can or how we can best serve you. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so once you've installed all of the measures included in your OR-MEP scope and completed construction, then you're going to have a third-party verifier, such as an energy consultant or an architect who wasn't involved in actually installing the measures. They will submit the verification forms. So we need post-install photos that clearly show equipment nameplate, model numbers, level of insulation, and whatnot, to confirm that everything was installed as proposed. We also need that third-party verifier to fill out a single-page form called the measure verification form. And that verifier will need to follow the sampling protocol that's in our program manual, which is they have to verify the first 7 units plus 1 in every 7 units thereafter, and getting a good mix of buildings, unit types, orientation, to get a good sample. All right, next slide, please. All right, and then last but not least, we will issue the incentive payment. So once we receive all of those verification documents and reviewed all of the required documents, your energy advisor will issue a completion letter, and then we'll hand you off to the OHCS staff, who, if you're receiving other funds from OHCS, it's going to be the production analyst that you're already working with. And their requirements will vary depending on what else is going on with your project, but will include like a grant agreement, executing the affordability agreement, collecting payment information, other project-specific requirements as needed. And this step can take anywhere from a few weeks to many, many months. And a lot of that is dependent on how quickly project teams are responding to the production analysts on their requests. And then so given the we have that really strict time constraint on these funds. And then so we ask that you respond very promptly to their requests. Okay, and then once your production analyst has helped you through all of those final documentation, then they will issue the incentive payment. All right, so that's the process. And then next slide, please. All right, and then now we're going to go through some example projects and scopes. Next one. Okay, first is Oro Vista Village. It's located in Talent by Age Plus in Silver Dollar Legacy. This is a new construction project with 26 units. They installed ductless heat pumps, and because Talent is considered rural in our program, probably by everyone, but they received the rural DHP bonus of $500 per unit. They also did efficient windows, Energy Star bathroom exhaust fans, and Energy Star dishwashers. And this project received $82,290, which is just over $3,000 per unit. Next one, please. All right, and then the other one that I want to show you is Carson Commons. This is in Dallas. Dallas, Oregon by Polk CDC. Also a new construction project with 20 units. And they also did ductless heat pumps, and Dallas is also rural in our program. And then so they received $500 per DHP that they installed. They also did efficient windows, and they did Energy Star dishwashers and refrigerators. They received $81,320 or just over $4,000 per unit. All right, next slide. All right, so that was a lot of information there, but just wanted to circle back to the next step if you recall. So if you have any projects that you're interested in enrolling or you want to discuss your project any further with program staff, please submit an interest form, which is available using the link on this slide here, or if you navigate to our website, OregonMultifamilyEnergy.com, it's available if you click the submit an interest form button on the top right of the home page. All right, so that's what I got. I'll pass it back to you, Micah.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. So this concludes the content that we had to cover. Before we move on to answering any questions, and if you do have any questions, you can enter them into the Q&A box. I do see a couple that have come through so far. We had a final poll question for you to gauge if you might have a potential project to enroll in OR-MEP federal funds. So we'll launch that poll now. Okay, you can see what the results are. Okay, yeah, a good mix of projects, 26% in PGE packed surface area, 21% outside of packed PGE service area, some of you with maybes and others with you that don't have a project. So yeah, that's good to see. Gives us an idea of what to expect. Yeah, for those of you that do have a project, as Julia mentioned, feel free to submit an interest form to get in touch with us, start talking about it. All right, we will move on to the Q&A. Sarah, if you want to get that started for us.
Absolutely. I'll start reading out questions in order received. So the first one we have for state funding, can we assume the construction deadlines will follow the same 6-month rolling timeline? For example, if enrollment occurs every 6 months and we feel we cannot achieve this next deadline of March 1st, 2029, will the next deadline be September 1st, 2029?
Okay, I'll try to go back to that slide, that visual. So for state funds, the March 1st, 2029, that specific date is not applicable to state funds. That only applies to federal funds. So for state funds, the completion deadline is specific to that project and when we reserve incentives. So with the open enrollment process, if you're say the project that was selected in the most recent round, they have until October to reserve incentives. So between now and November, we set the deadline based off of when that reservation. So 18 months if it's an existing building, and then 36 months for a new construction.
Great. And then the next question we have, can you please define construction completion? Is it TCO, certificate of occupancy, can the buildings be complete but still have public improvements to finish?
Yeah, that's a good question. For the purposes of OR-MEP, what we're really trying to see for completion is that you will reserve incentives for a proposed energy efficiency scope. And in order for us to pay out on those incentives, you need to demonstrate that all of those energy upgrades have been installed. So that's what we're looking for at completion. So any upgrade that you propose in your scope, you can demonstrate through photos and your third-party verifier that each of those measures were completed and installed. So that's what triggers our completion.
Great. Next question. Can the OR-MEP incentives be stacked with Energy Trust of Oregon incentives?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm gonna have to divide it up. So for OR-MEP federal funds, with OR-MEP federal funds, you can serve projects in PAC PG service area and outside of PAC PG service area. So obviously, Energy Trust only serves projects in PAC and PGE service area. So we would only be able to serve with federal funds the projects that are also being served by Energy Trust. So with federal funds, you can, if you're in PAC and PGE service area and also doing Energy Trust, because they're two different funding sources, you can stack Energy Trust and OR-MEP incentives. It just cannot exceed the total cost of for the project. For state funds, with new construction projects, we can't co-fund, but for existing projects, we do have an allowance through the Oregon PUC, Public Utility Commission, to allow co-funding with Energy Trust existing multifamily and OR-MEP existing multifamily projects.
Right.
Hopefully that was clear. Sorry, I kind of stumbled there.
That was great. And then we have a question. Are projects that would typically be able to apply for state funds allowed to apply for federal funds outside of the state rounds, or must they wait for the state round?
Yeah, so with the federal funds, it's eligible to any project statewide. So that means if you have a project in PAC or PG service area, you're also eligible for federal funds. So if you didn't get selected in a previous round and want to apply for funding for OR-MEP, you are eligible for the OR-MEP federal funds. If you submit an interest form to us, we'd be happy to talk through your project and learn more about your project and help you decide if the state funds or federal fund pathway is best for you.
Great. I think that's answered all of the open questions. I'm not sure if folks have any other last minute questions they'd like to type in the Q&A.
Right, I'll give it a few seconds if anyone wants to enter any questions. And then while we're waiting, I'll just put this screen back on this slide back on the screen. So if you do have a potential project, we encourage you to submit an online interest form to meet with our program staff, discuss your project, and confirm your eligibility. Yeah, we're looking forward to serving more projects with these new funds, especially in the parts of the state that we haven't been able to previously. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, so we can call it there. Thank you all for joining today's webinar. We will share the recording and slides via email, and it'll also be posted on our website. Yes, and if you have a project, please get in touch with us via an interest form or send us an email at our program email address. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.